We're having a solidarity moment here. Okay, thank you, everybody. Okay, we have some very special guests this afternoon who are going to share their perspectives. It's really exciting that we have Jackie Patterson from the NAACP, who is going to lead this off. She's the director of the NAACP's Environmental and Climate Justice Program.
So I was asked to kind of give a little bit of a sense of the overarching themes for the day and kind of tie them in with the work that we're doing and talk about the charge going forward. So we talked about this kind of overarching theme of power over people and the lack of true democracy. We also talked about the shrinking of the commons and the erosion of public services. And with that erosion of public services, we've seen a loss of basic needs and basic rights, including access to water, electricity, homes, transportation, and decent work that's already happening in terms of our policies and our policymakers being controlled by corporations, and this being the result. In the United States, we're seeing electricity shutoffs that are higher in the communities of color that are host to coal plants and poor communities as well. I met a family in Shiprock, New Mexico, who lived on a Navajo reservation. Everyone in the family had a respiratory illness, and they lived within 50 miles of 4 coal-fired power plants. And their nation leader fought to have those 4 coal-fired power plants in their community because they came with the promise of jobs. We also know that same Navajo reservation, 70% of the people on that reservation have no electricity and have no running water. So we also talk about the privatization of water, speaking of water, in terms of the shutoffs that we've seen in Detroit and in Baltimore. There's 23,000 people who are threatened with the water shutoff currently, and other places that are seeing this issue more and more. So again, the loss of access to basic needs. We've seen the loss of life and energy extraction as referenced in Canada, and we've seen the same here with the BP oil drilling disaster, and historically with the 76,000 coal miners who have lost their lives to black lung disease since 1968, while year after year the industry has fought against the proper regulations for coal mine dust. And then climate change becomes a threat multiplier for all of these issues. We're about to commemorate the 10th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, where 1,800 people died because they didn't have the transportation to escape. If they had just had access to transportation, they would still be with us today. Many died yearly to these different storms and disasters due to poor housing stock or lack of housing. The folks from the Nurses Union were talking about health care. Last night I just came in from Florida, which ranks 48th out of the 50 states in people without health insurance. Yet they experience more severe storms than any other state in the nation, and they're ranked 3rd in the nation for the worst pollution from coal plants and have a higher incidence for heat-related illnesses. And again, we start to see how all of this is interconnected. But yet at the same time, on a positive note, we're excited by the uprising that's happening and the types of victories that we're seeing from the different actions of our communities. The Asian Pacific Environmental Network out in California has been fighting against pollution from the Chevron on the Bay Area communities, and they've seen some victories there. The Idle No More campaign with indigenous groups have been fighting against the tar sands. We have indigenous groups here like the Indigenous Environmental Network, the Black Mesa Water Coalition, and they're seeing victories as well. We're seeing the redesign of our communities as resistance, led by groups like Emerald Cities, by Movement Generation for Change, the Climate Justice Alliance, and some of the same groups that are doing the anti-toxics work. We're seeing groups that are fighting back by not getting our food from Monsanto and not supporting factory farms because we're growing our own food. We're not getting dirty energy from Duke Energy, which dumps thousands of tons of coal ash in the waters and streams of Indiana and North Carolina and otherwise, but instead we're having our community-owned solar gardens. We're not burning or burying our trash, and instead groups like the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives and the groups that they work with are looking for alternatives for community-owned recycling that creates local jobs and keeps jobs in communities. The NAACP is working with LIUNA, and also I should mention that Gaia has worked with the Teamsters Union on doing that. The NAACP is working with LIUNA and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers at the local level on energy efficiency and creating jobs through retrofitting and weatherization. We're also working with the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance to look at the U.S. policies and how they affect folks across the world. They talk about this whole electrify Africa as if it's a good thing, but when it's electrifying Africa but by polluting industries, we start to peel back the layers of what sounds like a good thing and see what it actually is. We see the tensions around ensuring that nations are reaching their development goals, but aren't constrained by the clean development mechanisms that we're calling for. But we want to make sure that folks are growing in an equitable and clean energy way. We also tie our works to the Black Lives Matter movement, because in some ways we're seeing communities that are being dumped, the same communities that are being dumped on, the communities that are being polluted, are the same communities where people are being shot down in the streets with impunity. So there was a chant that the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance talked about in Copenhagen, where they said 2 degrees is suicide. And we would also add to that and say 2 degrees is genocide, because it's the industrialized nations that are advancing that 2-degree number that is at the cost of the very lives of people in the global South. So as Judy said, these might be empty promises, but 45 Senate Democrats released today a letter to all 50 governors requesting input on the first new national energy policy in almost a decade. They called for 5 principles: investing in clean energy,